Steuben County, nestled in the southern part of New York State, was a quiet, rural area known for its serene landscapes and small-town charm. It's the kind of place where neighbors know one another, and children ride their bikes without fear. But on August 2nd, 1993, this otherwise peaceful corner of America would be forever stained by a tragic event. The morning of August 2nd began like any other. 4-year-old Derrick Joseph Robie, a bright-eyed child with a playful spirit, had just eaten his breakfast and was eager to meet friends at the local park. His path took him along a quiet residential street in the town of Savona, a small community in Steuben County. Little did anyone know that by the end of the day, Derrick would never make it home. But on that day, Derrick's path would cross that of another child, a boy named Eric M. Smith. Eric, only 13 years old, was already known to his peers as an outsider. He was alone in a world of his own and seemingly unnoticed by most of the town's residents. Yet, on that day, he would make a fateful decision that would change everything. Eric M. Smith wasn't a stranger to hardship. He grew up in a broken home, often struggling with loneliness and feelings of abandonment. His parents had separated when he was young, and Eric was left to grapple with anger and confusion. At the time of the murder, Eric had already been showing signs of isolation and was often teased by his peers. He had become known as a quiet, withdrawn child with a volatile temper, yet no one ever anticipated the darkness that would take hold of him that summer day. As Derrick continued on his way, unaware of the figure behind him, Eric's mind was consumed by dark thoughts. At some point, the two crossed paths, and Eric made a decision, one that would forever change the lives of both families. As Derrick reached a quiet spot in the woods near the park, Eric approached him. What happened next remains one of the most chilling and senseless acts of violence in recent memory. At some point, Eric sexually assaulted and murdered Derrick Robie. The details are difficult to comprehend. Eric, a young boy himself, took the life of a helpless 4-year-old. His actions would shake the community to its core, leaving everyone in disbelief. The brutal nature of the crime was incomprehensible, especially considering Eric's age. It wasn't until hours later that Derrick's body was discovered, hidden in a wooded area near the park. The investigation quickly began, but the entire community was in shock. How could a child be capable of such violence? The answer would soon reveal itself, through a chilling confession from Eric Smith. What followed would be a trial that shocked the nation, one that would challenge the concept of justice for juveniles and raise questions about the nature of punishment. Eric Smith's story, from a troubled youth to a convicted murderer, would forever leave a mark on the American justice system. On the morning of August 2nd, 1993, Derrick Robie prepared to head out alone to a summer camp at a local park. It was a short walk he had made many times before, one his mother felt safe letting him make alone. With a kiss goodbye, Derrick left, carrying a lunch his mother had packed in a white paper bag, unaware of the tragedy that lay ahead. Derrick walked with the carefree energy of a 4-year-old, excited for another day of games and friends. This familiar route through his neighborhood, which should have been safe and short, would soon become the setting for an unimaginable act. Eric M. Smith, on the other hand, woke with a different intent. Troubled by deep-seated anger and alienation, Eric had suffered from bullying and a difficult family life. On this day, his path would tragically intersect with Derrick's, driven by motives that remain difficult to fully understand. In a secluded spot near the park, where the sounds of play were faint, Derrick encountered Eric. The details of their interaction are known only through the chilling account that Eric would later provide to authorities. What transpired was a senseless and brutal act of violence. Eric assaulted Derrick, ending his young life in a manner that horrified the community and the nation. The exact motivations behind Eric's actions remain a complex tangle of psychological distress and disturbed thoughts. The aftermath of the crime was immediate and profound. As news spread, the small community of Steuben County was left reeling. Parents hugged their children a little tighter, and the innocence of the town seemed irreparably shattered. Derrick's body was discovered later that day, hidden and left alone. The brutal reality of his death began a painstaking investigation that would soon point to an unlikely suspect, a young boy living just a short distance away who carried a burden far beyond his years. As night fell over Steuben County, the quest for answers began. It was a quest that would delve deep into the darkest corners of human behavior, challenging our understanding of childhood, justice, and redemption. Eric M. Smith, born January 22, 1980, grew up in Steuben County, New York. To outsiders, his life may have appeared typical of any child in a small town. Yet, beneath the surface, Eric faced struggles that went largely unseen by those around him. From a young age, he grappled with issues of anger, isolation, and a turbulent family life. Eric's difficulties began at home. The son of divorced parents, he often found himself caught between two worlds, neither of which provided the stability a child needs. At school, Eric's quiet demeanor and struggles with speech made him a target for bullies, exacerbating his sense of isolation and anger. Psychologically, Eric was a puzzle that few could solve. Teachers and neighbors noted his temper and odd behaviors but saw no clear signs of the violence he would eventually commit. Eric's mental and emotional struggles were complex, influenced by his unstable home life and constant bullying. As Eric grew, the signs of trouble became more apparent. He was often seen alone, lost in his own world, a world that grew darker with each passing year. His interactions with others were marked by awkwardness and misunderstandings, deepening his isolation and resentment towards those around him. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Eric's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He harbored intense feelings of anger and revenge, feelings that went unnoticed until it was too late. The culmination of these dark impulses would be realized in a devastating act that shocked the community. On that fateful morning, as Eric set out from his home, his mind was set on a course that would end in tragedy. His path intersected with Derrick Robie's in the most horrific way imaginable. What drove Eric to commit such an act remains partially understood. A tragic mystery of psychological and social failures. Eric M. Smith's story is a chilling reminder of the complex interplay between individual vulnerabilities and societal failures. His actions left a community in mourning and a nation grappling with questions about the nature of evil and the capacity for rehabilitation in our youth. The alarm was raised when Derrick did not arrive at the park. Search teams quickly formed, tracing his usual path. The discovery was made in the secluded spot, a crime scene that spoke of a brutal interruption of a young life. The community's heartbreak began with the whir of sirens and the solemn faces of first responders. As the news of the murder spread, detectives descended on the area, piecing together the horrifying events. Every clue added to a growing profile of a crime that was both shocking and mystifying. The community looked on in horror and disbelief as the reality of the violence that had taken place became increasingly clear. This crime was not just a loss of young Derrick's life, but a profound loss of innocence for the entire town of Steuben County. As the sun set on that fateful day, the shadows it cast were long and deep, marking the beginning of a long journey towards healing and understanding, a journey fraught with pain and heartache. As the first light of day broke over Steuben County, the investigation into Derrick Robie's tragic death was already in full swing. Law enforcement officers, along with forensic experts, converged on the scene, determined to uncover the truth behind the brutal murder of a young child in their community. The community of Steuben County reeled from the shock. Parents clung tightly to their own children, grappling with fear and grief. The local park, once a place of joy and laughter, had become a somber sight of mourning. The town banded together, offering any assistance they could to aid the investigation and support the Robie family. With meticulous precision, detectives gathered every piece of evidence, from soil samples and footprints to fibers and fingerprints. Each clue was a potential key to unlocking the mystery of who had committed this heinous act. The forensic team worked tirelessly, knowing that the smallest detail could be the breakthrough they needed. As the investigation progressed, one name began to surface repeatedly: Derrick M. Smith. His recent unusual behavior and presence near the crime scene drew the attention of law enforcement. School officials and neighbors recounted Derrick's troubling actions and demeanor in the days leading up to the murder, painting a picture of a boy troubled far beyond the usual adolescent struggles. The evidence quickly mounted against Derrick, leading to his arrest. The community watched in stunned silence as the young boy, just 13 years old, was escorted from his home by police. The gravity of the situation was palpable. A child accused of murdering another child was a reality too harsh to comprehend. In the cold ambiance of the interrogation room, Derrick faced questions from detectives. After hours of careful questioning, Derrick's resolve faltered, and he confessed to the murder of Derrick Robie. His confession, detailed and disturbing, sent shockwaves through the room and beyond, as officers struggled to grasp the magnitude of his actions. The arrest and confession of Derrick Smith brought a mix of relief and profound sadness to Steuben County. Relief that the perpetrator had been caught, but a deep, lingering sadness over the tragic loss of Derrick and the disturbing reality that a child could commit such a violent act. The town was left to grapple with a wound that would take years to heal, if ever. As the trial of Derrick M. Smith approached, the small town of Steuben County braced for the proceedings that would captivate and divide the community. Legal teams on both sides prepared for a case that would not only determine Derrick's fate, but also set precedents for handling juvenile crime. The weight of the upcoming decisions hung heavily in the courthouse air. In the solemn courtroom, the trial began with powerful opening statements. The prosecution painted a picture of a premeditated act of extreme violence, stressing the brutality of the crime. In contrast, the defense portrayed Derrick as a troubled youth, overwhelmed by psychological issues that diminished his responsibility. The stage was set for a deep dive into the darkest corners of juvenile psychology and criminal responsibility. Throughout the trial, a series of witnesses came forward, each adding layers to the complex portrait of Derrick and the circumstances leading to the crime. Forensic experts discussed the evidence collected at the scene, while teachers and neighbors described Derrick's behavioral history. The testimonies were a mosaic of perspectives, each piece critical to understanding the full picture. The defense team focused on Derrick's troubled mental state, arguing that his actions were the result of untreated mental health issues and a problematic home environment. Expert testimony from psychologists emphasized that Derrick's capacity for understanding the consequences of his actions was severely impaired by his emotional and psychological conditions. On the other side, the prosecution challenged the defense's portrayal of Derrick as merely a victim of his circumstances. They argued that despite his mental health issues, Derrick exhibited enough awareness and premeditation in his actions to be held fully accountable. The intensity of the debate highlighted the complexities of justice in cases involving young offenders. As the closing arguments were made, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. The jury, composed of Steuben County residents, faced the daunting task of deciding Derrick's fate. Their deliberations would not only conclude the trial, but also reflect the community's values and beliefs about justice, redemption, and the nature of evil in one of their own. The verdict, guilty of second-degree murder, was met with mixed emotions. Relief and sorrow flooded the courtroom as justice seemed to be served. Yet the tragedy of two young lives lost in different ways lingered. The trial of Derrick M. Smith closed, leaving behind questions about the balance between punishment and rehabilitation in juvenile justice. In a courtroom heavy with anticipation, the judge handed down Derrick M. Smith's sentence. 9 years to life in prison, the maximum penalty allowable for a juvenile offender. This sentence reflected the severity of the crime, but also considered Derrick's age and psychological state. It marked the beginning of a long, uncertain road ahead for Derrick, one filled with potential for rehabilitation or the risk of further descent into despair. As Derrick entered the prison system, he faced the harsh realities of life behind bars. A child among hardened criminals, his journey through the correctional system was fraught with challenges. Prison life demanded adaptation and resilience, testing Derrick's mental and emotional fortitude in ways he had never experienced before. Within the confines of the prison, Derrick was given opportunities for rehabilitation. He engaged in educational programs, psychological counseling, and skill development courses designed to aid in his reformation. These programs aimed to address the underlying issues that contributed to his criminal behavior, providing a path for redemption and reintegration into society. Life in prison was not without its setbacks. Derrick faced the realities of confinement, moments of conflict, isolation, and the struggle against the stigma of being a child murderer. Each day was a test of his resolve to change, amidst an environment often resistant to such transformations. As the years passed, Derrick reflected on his actions and their consequences. The debate continued outside the prison walls. Society questioned the balance between punishment and rehabilitation, especially for juvenile offenders. Derrick's story stirred ongoing discussions about the capacity for change, the nature of justice, and the possibility of redemption. After nearly 3 decades behind bars, Derrick Smith approached the possibility of parole with a mixture of hope and trepidation. His preparation involved revisiting his past actions, the consequences of those actions, and the extensive rehabilitation efforts he had engaged in while incarcerated. This was a moment for Derrick to demonstrate his growth and readiness to rejoin society. The parole board hearing was a critical juncture in Derrick's life. Facing the board, Derrick articulated the lessons he had learned, the remorse he felt, and his plans for reintegration into society. The board members listened intently, their questions probing deep into Derrick's understanding of his crime, his rehabilitation, and his future intentions. The parole hearing also included impact statements from the community and Derrick Robie's family. These statements provided a poignant reminder of the lasting pain and loss caused by Derrick's actions. The board weighed these perspectives heavily, recognizing the deep scars left on the community and the balance between justice for the victim and the potential for redemption of the perpetrator. The decision on Derrick Smith's parole was not taken lightly. The board deliberated extensively, weighing the evidence of Derrick's transformation against the severity of his crime and the community's safety. This decision was a testament to the challenging balance between the ideals of justice, mercy, and societal protection. In a decision that brought mixed reactions, Derrick Smith was granted parole after 27 years in prison. This outcome was seen by some as a triumph of rehabilitation and mercy, while others viewed it with concern and sorrow, reflecting the ongoing debate over justice and redemption. Derrick's release was set for early 2022, opening a new chapter in his life and the community's history. Derrick Smith's release from prison marked a significant moment in discussions about the justice system's capacity for rehabilitation. His case continues to inspire debate on the effectiveness of long-term imprisonment for juveniles, the potential for personal reform, and the societal challenges of reintegrating former offenders. As Derrick steps back into society, both he and the community must navigate the complex path of reconciliation and adaptation. Even years after Derrick Robie's tragic death, his family's life remains forever altered. Each birthday, holiday, and family gathering is shadowed by his absence. The community, too, remembers Derrick, not just as a victim, but as a joyful child whose life was heartbreakingly cut short. The Robie family continues to grapple with a grief that time does little to ease, a reminder of the day that changed everything. Eric Smith's release from prison marked a new chapter in his life, but not the end of his story. Every day, he faces the immense challenge of reintegrating into a society that has not forgotten his past. Despite his efforts to contribute positively, skepticism and wariness follow his every step, a testament to the indelible mark his actions have left on the community. The release of Eric Smith reignited a complex debate on justice and rehabilitation. Communities and experts continue to wrestle with questions about the nature of punishment, the possibility of redemption, and how society should handle young offenders. Eric's case serves as a focal point for these discussions, challenging our beliefs about forgiveness and the capacity for change. Eric Smith's case has had lasting implications beyond the personal. It has influenced juvenile justice legislation, prompting lawmakers to reconsider how the legal system treats young offenders. The push for reforms aims to balance the need for accountability with the recognition that young people possess the unique potential for growth and change. In the years following Derrick's death, the community has sought ways to heal and remember. Vigils, memorials, and preventative programs have been established in his name, aiming to transform grief into action. These initiatives serve as a beacon of hope and resilience, striving to prevent such tragedies and to honor Derrick's memory by fostering a safer, more compassionate community for all children. As we revisit the quiet streets of Steuben County, this case compels us to confront profound questions about the nature of crime and the essence of punishment. What makes a just punishment, especially when the perpetrator is no more than a child themselves? The landscape of this small town bears silent witness to these unresolved debates, holding the memories of a tragedy that echo in the heart of this community. Forgiveness and the potential for rehabilitation are topics of deep contemplation. How does a society forgive? And what does it mean to rehabilitate someone who has committed such a serious crime? These questions challenge the very foundations of our justice system, pushing us to consider if there is room for transformation and redemption within the confines of our legal and moral boundaries. The ripple effects of this case have reached far beyond Steuben County, influencing legislation and reform across the nation. Lawmakers, educators, and advocates grapple with the complexities introduced by Eric's situation. How to fairly treat juvenile offenders who may still possess the capacity for significant personal growth and societal contribution. As this community continues to heal, it also seeks paths forward through education and prevention. Programs that focus on youth violence prevention and mental health are now pillars of the community's response to this tragedy. These initiatives represent a commitment to not only remember Derrick and acknowledge the past, but also to prevent such losses in the future. This case forces us all to reflect on difficult questions about human nature, justice, and societal values. Can a young person truly change? And at what point should they be allowed to re-enter society? These questions remain as we consider the broader implications of Eric's story and the countless other stories like his. As the sun sets over Steuben County, it leaves us with these lingering thoughts, challenging us to find answers that reconcile justice with humanity.